Hello, everyone. Hello. Nice that you're here. Nice that so many people shown up. So good to see you, to talk with each other. That's exactly what's Factory about, like to interact with each other, to talk to each other, to exchange with each other. Now let me introduce quick Matteo. Matteo is a business storyteller coach with a lot of experience. And now I want to welcome Matteo on stage. Thanks that you're here. We're really happy to have you here. And have fun, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. And thank you especially because you took time out of the Wednesday to come to a business storytelling event. So you're interested in storytelling and you made an effort to be here. I think you're a really special crowd and I really look forward to getting to know you a little bit better. My name is Matteo. My pronouns are he, him. My name is Italian. I'm originally from Italy. I've been in Berlin for the last 11 years. And I'm going to be your communication coach for today. So for today, for the next 1 hour and the 20 minutes of Q&A, I want to help you become excellent storytellers. Now, maybe I need to establish a little bit of my qualifications in terms of why should I be your coach? Why should you accept me as your coach? And we're going to start by playing a little game. Now, I'm not the usual coach. I'm not the coach that you're usually thinking about. I wasn't in the military. I don't come from the Ivy League. I'm not an actor. I'm not going to teach you how to fake it till you make it. Which actually is quite a good strategy. It's not that bad. I'm another type of coach. To explain that, let's play this game. Now, I started collaborating with a company that does psychological assessments. This company uses a test. It's called the Hogan test. But there's other tests that you might be familiar with. Like, for instance, the Myers-Briggs, or even the 4 quadrants. They have an assessment, and this assessment goes from 0 to 10. What is your attitude to communication? Do you want to guess where I stand between 0 and 10, knowing that I do this for a living? Any numbers? Oh, wow. Yeah. Any more? It becomes an auction really quick. 8. Any other numbers? Anybody thinks it's lower than 4? Okay, yeah, that's a possibility. How about we get to know the number? It's a very, very solid 5 out of 10. In terms of natural attitudes, I am smack in the middle, the perfect center of mediocrity. So, what gives me the credentials to be your coach today? Well, the reason is a little bit counterintuitive. The reason why I'm going to be a good coach for you is because I'm good with computers. Let me explain. When I was a child, my dad, who's really into anything new and technological, etc., bought the IBM PC. We're talking about 1982, which dates me a little bit. There wasn't any space in the house. My bedroom was bigger, and this landed there. Obviously, I was under instructions never to switch it on. 15, 16 years later, I have a career in technology. And I decide to switch from technology to marketing. Because as a technologist, I was doing a lot of stuff for marketers. And I was thinking, oh, why am I not on the other side calling the shots? I get into a marketing team. And they see me and they say, ah, you're good with computers. You're going to do our presentations. What's the link? What's the connection, I wonder? At the time, presentations for me and for my boss were slides. So early on, I started creating slides. And I thought, these are presentations. I was very reluctant at the beginning. But I was creating slides. I was doing the presentations for all the team. They were happy. And I got better and better and better at creating slides. At some point, I changed careers another time, and I ended up in this situation. Now, that's not me in the picture, but this is a person, and there's a number of movie scripts. And that is me at Warner Brothers in Italy, analyzing scripts. But I had absolutely no qualification to do the job. And what I did, I started reading them, I started checking them out, and you produce something that's called coverage. And actually, it's one sheet of paper that you give to an executive so that an executive can fake it and say, oh yeah, I read the script, and it says, does this and this, but actually our opinion is this and that. And I was producing that, with my ability to read and write in Italian and English. But I thought, I want to know more about this. And so I went on and I started looking for books that would teach me, what a good story is, what a good movie script is. And so, for instance, I ended up reading a story from Robert McKee. I actually even attended the seminar in New York from Robert McKee. And it's all a book about script writing, about creating compelling stories. And yeah, I brought a number of books, but most probably you might be familiar with The Hero's Journey from Christopher Vogler, which is a pretty short book, and it helps you basically decode most movies, most TV shows, most of everything you see in media. My job as a script analyst was short-lived, and I ended up in marketing. But a few years later, what happened is I went freelance. And as I went freelance, I realized as a freelancer, I had to communicate all the time. I had to create presentations all the time. And what I did is actually I went through the whole coaching, training, workshops, online course journey the wrong way around. Because I started creating something called Presentation Hero as an online course. And I thought, I'm a startup guy. I'm going to create a product first. I'm not going to sell a service. I'm just going to create a product. And actually, this started my career as a workshopper, as a facilitator. It started my career as a coach, as I am today. So today, what I want to give you is 5 principles. These are 5 principles that I've learned from 2014 when I launched Presentation Hero to today, where I don't talk about Presentation Hero as much, or I would say at all. And these are the things that have stuck the most with my clients, both in larger workshops with entire teams or companies, and in one-on-one coaching that I do mostly every day with my clients. So just 5 principles, and then we're going to break for Q&A. Sounds like a plan? Wonderful. Before we get there, I have another question for you. Now, this is going to be a pattern. When I talk about methodologies, what comes to mind? What is a methodology that you use? Anything? In general, let's start in general. Agile, right? Any other frameworks? Any other set of principles? Lean startup, exactly. So we use a lot of different frameworks like Agile and Scrum. And for instance, I know for sure there's at least one designer in the room because I have met them before, but I'm sure there's more than one designer. Yeah. Do you use methodologies and frameworks at all? Like all the time, right? Service design, user-centric design, UX design, you name it. It's all about methodologies. And yes, as you mentioned, entrepreneurship, lean startup. Now, nobody today would, go up on a mountain and, code for 3 years and then come back with a product, right? We will all go, we have an idea, we build it, we put it in front of an audience, we measure, we see actual usage, we don't run tests, we actually have actual people use actual software, and then we learn something and we apply it to the next cycle. And if we are lucky enough and we are smart enough, we can have these cycle really, really quickly. So this begs the question, what happens with communication? Where is the framework for communication? What kind of frameworks do you use for communication? We usually just wing it, right? For marketing, we have methodologies. For service, for design, we have methodologies. For software, God knows we have methodologies. Otherwise, waterfalls and cathedrals. A few companies have their own little frameworks for communication. One, I think, is also in the building. McKinsey has one. Anyone from McKinsey here? Not really. We don't have frameworks for communication. We just go ahead and oh, I have to do a presentation. Oh, okay, open PowerPoint. Oh, I have a slide that says title. Okay, title. And then it says subtitle. Oh, subtitle. That's what we do. Okay? It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way at all. Let's see if today we can find together a framework, a methodology for communication. And before we do that, before we start exploring these 5 principles, I'm usually in a workshop and I'm usually giving you these and you're putting your thoughts on these. Right now, it would be very impractical to share Sharpies and Post-its with you. But what I would like you to do is while I'm talking, please think about the next communication challenges you may have. Think about your next meeting. Maybe a difficult meeting that you have to facilitate. Maybe you also have an event where you have to be on stage like I am right now. Maybe it's simply a really tough conversation that you need to have with your boss or with your team. Do you have some challenges on your mind? Can I hear any of them? Anybody has a big presentation, needs to talk at a conference or at a meetup or an event? Yeah, a couple, 3, 4, oh, more, 5. Okay. Anybody has maybe a routine meeting that is not really working, like that weekly meeting that is stuck? Yeah, it needs facilitation, right? Anybody who has an upcoming hard conversation when they have to say something unpleasant? Just a few, but you're all very lucky. But yeah, we need a methodology. We need a framework, and you're in luck because you decided to devote your Wednesday afternoon to storytelling, to business storytelling, and now we're going to dive in the principles. So to start, principle number 1, I have to talk about you. I have to talk about you, my audience. I'm to talk about a audience. And I don't need to read your minds to know what you are thinking right now. Because we are at the beginning of a presentation, and you are a rather smart and delightful audience, and you are thinking, what's in it for me? Did I invest my time wisely? Did I choose the right talk? Because think about it. It all started, you found somewhere the news that there was this conference, this masterclass. It said business storytelling. And you thought, oh, okay, maybe that's interesting. And then you clicked on a link or something, and you ended up on a landing page. And on this landing page, there was like a tickets thing. Then you went on to Eventbrite. Maybe you were logged off of Eventbrite. You had to log in. That's a hassle, right? It always happens to me. It always lands on eventbrite.co.uk. I don't know why. And I'm logged in on the com, and then it lands on the DE. And then you actually grab tickets, and then you add it to your calendar, and you check your calendar that you were free. And then your calendar reminded you, and now you're here. Now, should I assume that now you're going to automatically pay attention? Because you went through all of this journey, and now you're sitting in front of me, so I can bore you for 1 hour. Because I got you here, you're captive. If you walk out, it's a kind of walk of shame. So I got you. I need to win your attention. I need to win your trust every second, especially at the beginning. I haven't given you the goods yet. I'm just promising, intro, bio. So every time you start any communication, I'm going to talk about presentations a lot, but think about meetings, think about memos, think about any opportunity you have to communicate. It could be at home, it could be with your significant other. You always have to assess and make sure to respond to this really important question. Principle number 1, answer this question. Tell me what's in it for me. What do I get? Do I get smarter? Do I get more attractive? Do I get something smart to say tonight? Do I get something that I can actually apply? Make it clear at the beginning. Attention is not a given. Attention is a transaction. Every time you do something, you are going to give something to some of the audience, but not to everyone at the same time. And be sure every time you start communicating, make it very clear what's in it for your audience. Admit it, you were thinking, what's in it for me? Is it true? Yeah. Not a mind reader. Principle number 1. For principle number 2, I need galaxies, lots of galaxies. Because principle number 2 is about my ego and about the ego of anybody who's on stage. What happens when somebody tells you, you're going to give a presentation? Well, the first thing you think is, I have to give a presentation. It's on me. I have to say something. I have to be eloquent. I have to make a good impression. I have to dress well. I have to have pretty slides. So it starts this sort of bit of an anxiety drive. Anybody here dealing with fear of public speaking or anxiety at all? Right. That's a problem. Where does anxiety come from, right? Anxiety comes from this, at least in my experience with my clients, anxiety is driven by the fact that we are so focused on our own performance, or lack thereof, that we get stuck in a loop where we're just thinking about ourselves. So I'm going to demonstrate with a very scientific slide. 4 stages and a graph. Stage 1. Let's use I to present. It's a game. I'm not serious. But I'm going to say something, and maybe it's true. I'm really happy to be here. I'm extremely grateful to Factory. I'm so glad that you all took the time. I'm going to take you on a journey. And I'm happy to talk about my favorite subject. I. It's not very engaging. It doesn't work so well. Shall we go a step further? Let's try a we. We are going to spend tonight talking about business storytelling. We are going to go on a journey. We are going to discover that there is a methodology to communication, that we don't have to wing it. Little better, okay. What's the problem with we? Am I being really honest with this we thing? There's a lot of I in my we. Yeah. I'm not really, I made a plan for you, and so I decided then that's the we. Are we a we yet? Are we a thing yet? Have we established bonds to call it? Huh? We didn't commit yet, no, and we're not even keeping it casual, right? We're not doing anything. We might be a we later when we have drinks, but for now, maybe you are a we, but I'm not included. So don't trust the people that start with the we. We can get to the we stage and commit later. Let's step it up. It. Business storytelling is a set of indications, is a set of principles that help you structure good communication. And business storytelling is something that is already in your blood, at least in the form of storytelling. And my job is to actually elicit the knowledge that you already have and get you producing stories. Is it better than we? It's impersonal, okay. So we're not as engaging as we could. We could be more engaging if we went all the way, and I guess you know where I'm going. You are on a journey. You are motivated to discover business storytelling. You are going to make a step today. It's not about me. It's not me thanking people. It's not about we. We're not yet a we. It is about it, but it's only it if it matters to you. So the second principle, most simply, is forget about those galaxies. Your ego will tell you many things, amongst which, next time, let's get a bigger room, Factory. But it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what matters to your audience. There's nothing else. Principle number 2, always start with your audience in mind. If you build your communication step by step, just by thinking about your audience, and by the way, there's a lot of questions like, how do I know what my audience wants? Ask them, okay? A lot of times before a class or a seminar, I will send a survey to people or stalk them, LinkedIn them, understand, are they in a job since 3 months or since 10 years? Because they're going to have different objectives in one case or the other. And ask people that know these people. So there's always a way to understand the audience. And then sometimes you can work with a little bit of fiction and you can start thinking, oh, okay, I don't know these people. I could imagine that I am the growth and success manager at Factory and I have this and that on my mind. So always start with your audience. Principle number 2 of 5. I'm excited because for the next principle, I get to share the stage with someone really special. Cersei. For those who have not watched Game of Thrones, this is a very multifaceted character, and it's one of my favorite villains of all time. But if you don't know Game of Thrones, think about your favorite villain. Actually, think about your favorite story. Think about your favorite movie right now. And try to make it work without the villain. So Neo in the Matrix. Neo goes in and out of the Matrix, goes to Zion, then says, oh, Zion's boring, goes back into the Matrix. There's no Smiths. There's not a big problem. Okay? And it's a story about the metaverse, more or less. Harry Potter, no Voldemort. Bunch of kids, a little bit nerdy, go to a fancy school. There's a lot of different tribes. They learn magical arts. You know, sometimes a colleague or a friend is mean, but more or less, they're just high school kids. Doesn't work. Okay? Batman without a Joker. Doesn't work. So we need villains to drive stories. How do I know? Try to tell a fairy tale to a child where there's no villain. Or try to tell a story where everything goes well. Okay? So yesterday I had a workshop in Veneto, in Italy. It was the ending of a series of 6 workshops. It went really well. And to celebrate, I went with my co-trainer to a delightful little town you never heard about called Portogruaro. And we had the most amazing dinner with a fantastic wine. Okay. Then I woke up, got on a plane, got here. Now I'm delivering this masterclass. That's not a story. I need to stumble and fall, and there's going to be there needs to be a problem. The airplane is going to another place, and I don't know, but there has to be a villain. So how do we translate this idea that we have, that villains drive stories in the fictional world, and how do we translate it to business? Because do we want villains in business? Apparently, no, instinctively not, right? We have enough trouble in our lives. Yet, we have villains in all communication. The first villain we were talking about before is attention. Attention is a continuous transaction. I ask for it, you give it to me. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you're thinking about, oh, I left the milk out of the fridge. Oh, I need to buy this at Edeka. I don't know. Or maybe you're thinking already about your next presentation, and so you're not following anymore. You're thinking, oh, how do I address the what's in it for me for that presentation? That's going to be tricky. Attention is always a villain. It's a good villain to have. It's a good villain to take into consideration. So you can plan to have moments of engagement, and then moments of explanation. Not like in the Matrix, where it's mostly an explanation most of the movie. And then criticism. I tell you, hey, villains are really important in business storytelling. And you'd say, what is he on about? You know, usually I get to this point in the explanation after 4 or 5 hours of one-on-one coaching. I'm giving this to you 20 minutes into my presentation. What happens if you don't understand? What happens if you have a question? What happens if you're critical? What happens if you push back? Nothing. Nothing bad. I just get to explain myself once more. I listen to the question and I try to understand, oh, you're using that kind of language, so I can use that kind of language in my answer. So criticism is good. I spend a lot of time in my workshops talking about villains, and I'm under no expectation that this principle is going to be clear in just a 1-hour masterclass. But it is extremely powerful. And finally, remember the story I was telling you before? A great workshop, a nice dinner, waking up, flight is on time. That's not a story because there's no issues. And we are constantly looking for issues. We are problem solvers, not just engineers amongst us. We are all problem solvers. We all love solving problems. This is also why we tend to trust the pessimist more than the optimist. We tend to think that the optimist is trying to sell us something. Oh, the future is great. You can all use business storytelling. There's not going to be any problem. We don't trust that person. And why is that? We are looking for issues. We're looking for problems like a child is looking for a villain in a fairy tale. Like we are looking for our TV shows to have ever more story points and plot points and things that happen and other things that happen and layers of characters to make it more complex, to make it more engaging for us. So enjoy your villains. Put your villains in your communication. Don't be shy about it. Principle number 3 is without villains, you haven't got a story. So when are you going to start thinking about these villains? And for instance, do you at any time have to communicate and persuade people about anything? Sell or pitch? Okay. So do you want to do it like a politician? Like, oh, I'm best. I'm your choice. My agenda is fantastic. So vote for me. Or do you want to do it in a way where you provide the ingredients, you provide the information, you say, if we go that way, this happens, this good happens, this bad happens. You make a choice. Every time clients come to me and they say, oh, I need to be really persuasive and I want my point to really come across, what we end up doing is we end up exploring the whole spectrum of the possibilities. We end up looking at every pro and con of every option, and then giving our audience a gift of choice, a well-informed, all-rounded choice. So use those villains, integrate those villains in your communication. We're more than halfway there. We have 2 principles, and then we'll start with questions. Principle number 4 is about why use storytelling. Storytelling is great if you have something to say that will give a certain state to your audience before and another one after. If there is something that changes between these 2 moments, this is the moment where you want to recruit storytelling. For instance, you want to introduce a new idea. And sometimes to introduce a new idea, you don't go ahead and just introduce the idea. You let your audience doubt what they think already, and you let them actively start looking for something different. Or maybe you're in marketing, like I was, or I probably still am, marketing for many years. You know what creates a desire? A 15-second ad, if it's targeted to you and if it responds to what's in it for me. Marketers are storytelling experts. They have to engage you. They have to bring you in the communication, and then they have to change you. I didn't want that product. Oh, now that product is something I desire. And I'm going to click and impulse buy it. That's what happens on on the internet, on social media. A lot of times, what we need to do is not inform the whole world about something radically new, but actually change how they feel about something. It's not like we don't know about climate change, but we put so much feeling into the facts and figures of climate change that at some point we need to change our collective feeling about it. And it's the same with a lot of new things. It's not about the facts. It's about how we perceive things. And unfortunately, we are way more sensitive to stories than to data. I have a few examples to prove this, but they're not so nice to hear. And finally, how easy of me. I'm teaching you something. What's happening today is that there's a before. You're interested in business storytelling. Probably you know a lot about business storytelling, and you get to hear my take on business storytelling. So principle number 4 is that you always want to transform your audience. You want to change them. You want there to be a before and an after. Now, there's a few cases where you don't want to recruit storytelling, and that is when your communication is informational. For instance, in about 15 to 20 minutes, we'll have Q&A. That's an information. In 40 minutes, we'll have drinks. That's an information. I could make it prettier. I could say, there is a wondrous fridge that contains amazing beverages, and the networking that will happen will be magical. But it's still the same thing. I'm putting lipstick on a fridge, honestly. So you want to transform your audience when it matters, when your message is worth recruiting this powerful tool. But if not, you're just adding decoration. What I usually do when I have a presentation, and a lot of times I end up having a bunch of slides that I don't need, I just ask myself a question. Does this slide change my audience? Does it help bring in this transformation that I want to get? And if not, I just delete the slide. Let's go to principle number 5, and the most important. What am I showing you here? What is this? Have you seen this before? Yeah, 3 stages of a story. That's a good way of putting it. 3 acts. Have you heard of 3 acts before? Maybe in school? Yeah. So what are these 3 acts? Help me. Teach me about the 3 acts. What's Act 1? You start. So you get the attention of people, and the attention of people goes up, and it can drop. What happens in a movie in the first act? You get to know the heroes, you get to know the characters. Do you get to know them in complete isolation? Like in a white space, like in an Apple ad? No. You get to see them in a location. How does this first act end? Okay. They get in trouble. Exactly. There is an incident at some point that gets us into Act 2. Could you explain Act 2 to me? What happens in Act 2 of the movie? Conflict. Lots of fighting. You know, modern movies. Every Marvel movie is now just fighting. Okay? Just a battle. You don't even know who's fighting. Okay? It's called the road of trials. And what happens? The characters need to learn new skills. How does this second act end? They defeat the dragon. They defeat the evil power. They defeat the villain. Okay, but if there's no villain, why do we have an Act 3? What happens there? Sorry? Yeah, there needs to be an ending. Okay, we're not satisfied with the big wedding or the slaying of the dragon. We want more. We want a happy ever after, but how do we get the happy ever after? We'll see it in a second. We want our characters to go back to the stage that they were at the beginning, but changed. Okay, they are not the same. The heroine of our story has completely changed, and she has to go home to a world that hasn't changed. So, wait a second. So, you just taught me the 3-act structure. What am I doing here? You're the experts. Sorry? You watch enough films, right? Okay, but I tell you another one. If you tell a kid a joke and then you stop before the punchline, you stop before you make them laugh, how happy is that kid? They're going to cry. They're going to nag. They're going to get that ending. Okay. What do they know about storytelling? It's intuitive. It's the way that we always communicate. One of the things that happens during my workshops is that a lot of people come to me and say, the structure that you just taught me is exactly what happened over the course of 2 or 3 months and how we resolved the conflict that we had in the company. But since we didn't have in mind the framework, we didn't have in mind the methodology, it took us 3 months to solve it. Now that I know, I could solve this in way less time. Obviously, you need to convince other people, so it's not like, oh, I just use storytelling as a superpower and now everybody's convinced. But you get to see the different parts of the story. Now, I've demonstrated that you are story experts and you are great at analyzing stories. Now, let's have a look at the other side. How do we produce stories? I'm sure that a lot of you are already producing stories, but let's look at how stories are visualized. Maybe it could give us some clues to how to use storytelling in business, to have that difficult conversation, to have that talk, to speak at that event. One way to look at it is the traditional hero's journey. Now, this slide animates because it all starts to the right and goes all the way to the left. Now, this visualization I find quite interesting because there is this horizontal threshold. There is this horizontal threshold between the ordinary world, and the story begins and ends in this ordinary world. This is what we were talking about before. The characters, we meet them at home, everything is fine, then there is a problem, a crisis, something, and what do? They go into an extraordinary world. They go into the adventure world, but then they need to come back. What happens in a meeting? Well, you need to invite people, you need to get them to attend, then you need to get them to pay attention, then you need to get them to learn something new, to maybe agree on something. But then you also need to let them go back to their day. And hopefully, this is a good meeting that we're talking about. There's going to be next steps. It's not going to just end there. You know, like, oh, after this meeting, then, yeah, we're going to have another meeting. That's the worst that can happen. You want to have some change. We talked about the transformation right before. My favorite way of visualizing a story is this one, also because I invented it. It's a mountain, okay? You climb a mountain. The idea that you start from what's in it for me of your audience, your what's in it for me, that hopefully I've answered by this point. Then you start motivating your audience about what you're going to talk about. And at some point, you start to talk about the thing. Okay, so you start bringing those ideas that are going to lead to a transformation. You start explaining those ideas that lead to a transformation. What happens then? There's a crisis. There is a problem. There's a big problem. You get resistance. Is that bad? It's normal. Every new thing, like, just wake up in the morning. I really want somebody to change my mind today. That never happens. So what happens after I meet this resistance? A lot of times, I go back. A lot of times, I get stuck in this loop. I need to go back to motivate my audience to actually pay attention, to actually commit, to actually start thinking about the thing. And at some point, with parts of your audience, especially when you have, let's say, 100 people like we have now, you can't convince everyone, and you can't convince everyone at the same time with the same words. We're all different. I used Game of Thrones as the example. For some of you, pretty clear. For others, what the hell? I didn't watch that. And I know it's just ideas. Ideas are polarizing. Some ideas stick. Some ideas just fly away. Probably you forgot half of the things I just talked to you about, and that's normal. But at some point, if I really brought the right ideas to at least some part of the audience, you get to that peak of change, the big idea, the moment of transformation. What happens then? You gotta end. Once you've made the big change, you have to plan your exit, and you have to plan your exit pretty quickly. Because at that point, all you want is engagement. And that engagement is not even anymore about the message so much, but is about a relationship building and about building trust. We could spend a lot of time analyzing this, but I want to show you another couple of visualizations and then get to our Q&A. Another way of looking at a story, especially from the point of view of analyzing a story, comes from renowned presentation specialist Nancy Duarte, and it's called the spark line. Now, the spark line tells us that in most presentations, there are just two moments. There is the baseline, where we analyze the 3-act structure and we think about, a movie. And then there is the change. There's something new. That is thinking, that same structure is something I can use for my communication. And the whole presentation is going between an anchoring, something you already know about, and something you don't know about. And that difference between what you know and what you don't know is the change that you wish to elicit. There's very many ways you can visualize a story. They don't need to be as linear as I described to you right now. And these are just a few of the visualizations that you can get. But my message is that this is a structure that you can leverage to create a successful workshop. This is a structure that you can leverage to organize a good weekly meeting, an update, a big change, a big transformation event for your company. You can use it to create a presentation. I certainly used it to create today's presentation. Stories are everywhere. You already are experts at analyzing them. Why? Because you're human. Now, for you, is the time to start creating those stories. As we approach Q&A, in every good presentation, there needs to be a summary. And here it goes. We started from what's in it for me, the most important question you need to answer at the beginning of any presentation. Then forget about the ego. Forget about asking for a bigger room or a bigger car or a bigger house. Start with the audience. Your audience will tell you what the message is, and then focus on that message. Learn how to recruit villains to drive your story forward. And if not, deal with the most important villain, attention. Transform the audience. Have a clear before and after. And finally, you already are a story expert. You're ready to create business, marketing, narratives whenever you wish. So, yes, we have a framework for communication. We have a framework for communication, and it's called business storytelling. And a little bit of that I've given to you today. 1 hour is a very short time to deliver all the nuance. And obviously, I wish we were working with Post-its and whiteboards, etc., but that's completely different engagement. What does business storytelling enable? Business storytelling allows you to stop winging it, to stop improvising. So next time you have to create a memo or presentation, any communication occasion, you can start not from the blank page, but from a process. It gives you confidence through this process. It de-emphasizes all of the fear of public speaking and of the anxiety. This is something that I have witnessed many, many, many times with my clients. Gets rid of fear, makes you more concise. Because you're focusing on the message, you are getting across more consistently. And you are enjoying the process of communicating. And this is another thing that happens to a lot of my clients, that then they would say, okay, now I'm going to book that talk. Now I'm going to participate in that conference that I've been postponing all along. And being audience-centric, it's really giving you a superpower. And it's so obvious, right? Lean startup, minimum viable products. We put it in front of an audience, and then we learn from that. Service design. We interview the audience. We interview the stakeholders. And then communication, we wing it. And then actually, if we're having fun and if we are enjoying the process, our audience will also have fun. We are going to be more effective. We're going to come across and be heard. And finally, our ideas can be out there. So my invitation for you is get your ideas out. I would like to see you on stage the next time using this framework to spread your message, your ideas. Now, I leave it to you, to your questions. Thank you so much. We will have a microphone. Yeah.
Hi, Sabir here. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have an answer to your question as well regarding to communication framework. This is AIDA model. So you probably know about it, AIDA model.
AIDA. Yeah.
Okay, that works really well. So what is the mostly is challenging for me? Like I do everyday sales and at least 300, 400 calls a day. And most complicated thing is the attention, as we also discussed. So in that cases, I have around 5 seconds to convince someone to be in a call with me. That is the biggest challenge. And what do you think is the best framework for 5 second speech?
Depends on what you know about them. The fact about audiences is all audiences are self-centered. So when you are engaging somebody on a sales call, you have to address really what's in it for them. What is it that they gain, and something that is definitely selfish about them. And so with experience, you're gonna try and see what are the aspects that elicit the ego of your audience. So the presenters are not allowed to have egos, but the audiences do.
Yes, I understand what you mean. Like, I need to do addition to that. Like, this is really hard and challenging. You know, like you get information about the client, which is on internet, but it's still hard because it doesn't work when even if you're focused on the client. So this is really hard.
What I do in my workshops is I help people understand that most of the time we are communicating in a purely transactional way. Like, I have this product, I have this workshop, why don't you buy it? Well, actually, what people are interested, what communication we're interested in hearing is a communication that is about our long-term goals. So in the next 10 years, I'm building a training company. So if you want to interact with me, you have to say something that tells me, oh, this will help me build this big training company that I have in my mind. And a lot of time we go very low, very ground level on a transactional way. And so if you start getting to know this audience, try and understand when they wake up, what are they thinking about? What is it that they're worried about? And what is it that they are excited about? And most of the time, obviously, it won't be calling with you. I'm sorry. It's not going to be, this morning, I really want to be interrupted by somebody that sells me something. No, we don't wake up with that spirit. But I'm sure you're going to find out what is their life trajectory and what is it that you can say to sort of intercept that trajectory. I hope that helps.
A question?
If there's no one else, we can stick to this corner. I'm Alex. Hi. Thanks for this great talk. I have a quick question. I got a bit confused about this, what's in it for me, because I always think first what's in for them, which is your second principle, right? And that's also maybe what you need to set the hook, right? You need to think what's in it for them. Or yeah, maybe can you say a few words about more how do you say, or how do you see this, what's in it for me?
Right. When it's very complicated because I'm switching between your perspective looking at me and my perspective looking at you. What's in it for me is something that your audience is asking you. So what's in it for them is what you have to tell them. I hope this clarifies. And it changes all the time. It changes at 6 o'clock, it changes at 7 o'clock. It changes depending on the invitation of the meeting. So there's never a rule. Something that might work with this audience, for instance, talking about methodologies in Berlin to a startup-friendly crowd, it's something that works. In Veneto, in Italy, in an industrial company, it doesn't work because they work in a different way and they're not permeated by this startup culture. So I use that to motivate you to follow this talk, but it doesn't work everywhere, for instance.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, so I have a technical question about your presentation. So I've noticed something in your presentation that some of the graphics were almost hand drawing effect. I guess I assume it is
yeah.
have something more sympathetic with the audience. And some of the photos that you have shown to me was more of a generic, and I've never seen any single photo taken by you or maybe your photo yourself. Is it something intentional so that audience have more sympathetic because the third person photo is more effective, or it's just a coincidence? And the background, the lighting, that magenta color, does it do anything psychologically?
So the hand drawing is it's actually something that comes out of my sketching, and I always start sketching, and I start sketching with the iPad, also with a non-smart pen, because the iPad is pretty powerful even with the finger or with a €1 pen, and it actually turns out pretty good usually. And so what happens is I leave it into the presentation for the longest time. And I like to have this the switching back and forth. Like, for instance, one of the things that nobody uses in presentations is that you have a button and the screen goes dark. And so if you want to really make a very, very serious point and just focus on me and look at me now, you can also use this. And photos, yeah, a lot of times you try to explain a concept with a photo and you end up with a more generic photo. I always also try to use my own personal photography, but I'm not that good yet, even though the phones are getting better, making us better photographers. Yeah, so the lighting is nothing particularly, yeah. There's no really color coordination. Obviously, color theory is out there, it exists, so you can also use color theory, but the most important aspect is usually contrast. You just want to have a really strong contrast. This is a wonderful screen, but a lot of times you won't have this kind of projection equipment, and so you always want to have high contrast slides. Okay, so another question here.
I'm Gabriel. According to your framework, you said you should stop when you've achieved change in your audience. And how do you know you've achieved change?
You don't most of the time in real time. You'll try to gauge, especially in person, you'll try to gauge by the body language and people smiling or people nodding. There's a lot of nonverbal cues that you can get from an audience. You can ask them. You can do the raise hand. If you're online, it gets a bit more tricky, but we have tools there. You can launch a poll, start asking questions. Most of the time, you will get feedback afterwards, and it's really hard if you have one presentation that you give one time, and then you never have a cycle, like a lean cycle, where you can do some improvements. But if you have, for instance, a startup pitch and you're giving it over and over and over again, you'll start to understand, okay, this ingredient works, but it works in that position, and that ingredient really doesn't work with that crowd. And so you're going to start optimizing that presentation for different audiences. Like, for instance, I do with this one. So a lot of times it's a lot of work that you do after the fact.
Moment. So you said there is no story without villains. But with the colleague down here, you said we should think about what the person gets excited about when he wakes up. How do you accustom for cases where you want to think about the assets rather than the problems?
You wanna show how the assets solve problems most of the time. Just talking about assets in isolation and its kind of blue sky approach, it does work in terms of business, but it doesn't work in terms of storytelling. It's not sticky. I'm not going to remember a story where everything is optimistic and there's nothing going wrong. And so if you want to frame a positive asset, the best way to frame a positive asset is if you take it out of the picture, what is the negative that is in that space, for instance?
So would you say, for example, an Apple product presentation is a bad presentation because they're usually talking about how magically and how great it is, not really about villains, do they?
Oh, they do all the time. If you go to the, for instance, the Steve Jobs presentation, 2007 introduction of the iPhone, think about the spark line, the two lines I showed before. Jobs takes the stage and says, today we're going to launch a phone, big cheer. And then start analyzing the smartphone market of the time. And that was the BlackBerry. And it has a slide with a BlackBerry, and then has continuing slides showing what is the problem with the BlackBerry. And then there's a slide where you see the cutout of just the keyboard. And so it frames this today. So today for us, a smartphone is this phone with a keyboard, a limited screen, and if I want to add a new functionality, I cannot change the keyboard. That's his selling point. And then they go to the world of tomorrow. We got rid of the keyboard. And this is something that they do all the time. Most of the time they reference the product that they had before. So for instance, they will say, oh, the screen was 600 nits. Last time we increased it to 900 nits. In that case, the villain is the product of last year. They always use anchor points. In the introduction of the iPad, there is another moment, another Steve Jobs moment, where they introduce the tablet, they show the tablet, and then they tell the audience, how much should it cost? Really showmanship there. How much should it cost? How much do you think? And then they have a slide with 999. Do you think would you pay $999 for it? And then they have the keynote effect that does boom and does, drops something from above. And then they drop $4.99. So they do the typical, restaurant style price anchoring exercise where you have the really cheap wine and then the really expensive wine and all the wines in the middle seem, oh, these are a good deal, right? And they do that with the pricing of the iPad. So they use this all of the time.
Thank you.
Thanks for a good talk. One question. You said that there are other methods which for example, when you talk about the fridge, you shouldn't apply storytelling. Are there any other methods you could recommend us to maybe dive deep into, other than storytelling, because it's not the best fit for every type of communication. So just other methods of communication.
The method of communication that you want when you're not applying storytelling most of the time are the methods that lead to clarity and being concise. And those are usually good writing. And so if you take a good writing course, you will get taught anyway storytelling in the process. But what you want is that clear and concise. And if you want examples, go online and look at important companies, go on their website and go into the press section and read their press releases. Press releases are a masterpiece of concise communication because they are targeted towards a lazy audience. I hope there's not too many journalists in the audience today, but journalists are lazy, okay? And they want to have something that more or less they can copy paste and make sort of news or article. And what they do in a press release is in the title of the press release, you already have most of the most important information. And then you're going to have a subtitle that expands a little bit and gives you some side information, response to some what's in it for me. And then you will have a first paragraph that summarizes everything. And then once they've established the most important aspects in a very concise way, they will go in different directions of the story and give you different angles of that. So if there's something to study to create non-storytelling communication that is really clear and concise, that's press releases.
I have one more question. You said that one villain is attention. Can you maybe give some examples for that, like where this is applied?
Oh, absolutely. I want to convince you to use business storytelling. Okay, well, at least this is the purpose of this talk. If you get to use my methodology, or if you get to use any storytelling methodologies, you're going to communicate better. And when I'm sitting in the audience of your presentation, I'm going to get, as an audience member, a better presentation. So this is my purpose. If I make it a really dull and boring presentation, like talking very monotonously without any inflection in my voice and very boring, many slides, lots of text, am I going to get through to you? Probably not. So this is the kind of villain that we're fighting. And it's late, okay? I might have been boring a few times during this presentation. And it happens. And you want to have ups and downs. This is a journey. It's not like everything is fantastic all the time. And so I am fighting all the time against that villain of attention. And I know that I'm not going to win all the time. I just need to win most of the time with a bunch of the people.
So I can completely understand that the attention is mostly the thing for customer products, like getting into the feeds, etc. But like for a really functional product, for example, where there's no competition, where they could say, okay, otherwise the attention would be for this product. Like, would you say there are cases where attention is not like a villain, and like you should choose another kind of villain?
There are some cases where I'm looking so bad for a solution that the script is flipped, right? That it's the other way around, that I really want to talk to you because you have my solution and you don't have time for me. So maybe you're talking about that situation where you have such an amazing cure for cancer but you don't have enough time to cure me. Okay, yeah, that is definitely a case. So in that case, there's many different villains that could be, in that example, the side effects or the long-term studies and so on.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions, if some questions are. What? Okay, first the lady, then you.
Oh, you had a question here in front.
Yeah. I have a question about the resistance page. So you present your idea to, for example, 5 people, so not a big crowd, and you notice that they think the idea is bad, or they don't want any change, or they just you notice without them asking questions that they don't want the change. So should you start again and show them other perspectives of the idea, or should you just stop and find another audience?
So do you persevere or do you give up? Great. If you want to persevere, you already said it, you want to use a different language. What people in sales do is, once they have your attention, they will ask you some leading questions to understand not only what your counter arguments are for the sale, but they also want to know what is the language you use to frame that counter argument. Because a lot of time we are explaining stuff from a point of view of, let's say, presentations as a frame, and people want to hear communication as a frame. And that's the only disconnect. And so the moment that you ask them some questions, you're going to get maybe some more information back. A lot of times we go into the communication opportunity saying, okay, I want to convince you. Most of the time what happens is, the first time you communicate something to somebody, you just want to instill a doubt. You don't want to full on convince them. You want to, maybe as we do in sales, you want to get them to a next call. You want to get them to a minimum viable commitment so that you have a relationship. And maybe this is something that you want to do. Again, sorry, not again, but the aspect that for me is very important to clarify at this point is that storytelling or business storytelling works when there is at least the availability for dialogue. So let's say that I'm in a very heated argument with my significant other and they really don't want to hear from me. I'm not going to storytell a solution. I'm going to try to get everybody's hearts and minds to calm down, and then later on we can talk about the problem. So we are not talking about the villain. When the villain becomes overheated and aggressive, there's no communication anymore. There's a bit of firefighting to do. I think we had a question in front.
No, one last question I think was here.
Oh, okay. we get to talk during drinks.
Hi. When you hear really good storytelling, what are some brands that come in mind? What are some of your favorite examples?
There's a lot of brands that do excellent storytelling. You can definitely think about right now, since we're in the middle of all of these Elon Musk thing of Tesla and sort of the storytelling of disruption that they do. If you look at storytelling with technology, we're also going a little bit back to Steve Jobs, but look at the Pixar story and how they sort of leverage the principles of storytelling to create more or less an empire so interesting that Disney had to acquire them, otherwise we wouldn't have a Disney today. Apple does an incredible job at creating a mystique around their brand and sort of being a utilitarian luxury brand in a strange way, and getting us to pay more and more for the same device. No more $4.99 iPads, I guess. So there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them that are in niches where they have really laser focused on a specific audience segment. And so a lot of them you will find on social, and they are, it's not automatic that their storytelling is great because it's so targeted to a certain tribe that they wouldn't ever break into the mainstream. Thank you. And you know what's next? You get to tell your story, and I want to hear it. And now some drinks. Thank you so much.